Hi, welcome back to DCS Debrief. Standard disclaimer then, I'm not a fighter pilot. These presentations are not authoritative. They're information inferred from my own experience in real aviation, where it's relevant, directly referenced official but open source literature, and anecdotal information from former fighter pilots who I happen to know. It's presented for critique and to add to the overall body of information on the topic of air combat in simulation games like DCS World. Like many tactics, techniques and procedures, application differs in key areas between the game and real life, and as such these presentations are only relevant to the game. I hope you enjoy it. So this video is going to cover attack window entry. It's almost inevitable that having gained the offensive in a within visual range engagement that you will be faced with a defensive bandit, and it will be necessary to enter their bubble in order to develop a shot opportunity. This mechanic is called attack window entry. The aim of this video is to learn the visual cues that indicate arrival at the attack window and how to judge whether you have correctly entered it. It will also be useful knowledge when you come to assess a bandit's attack window entry during the Defensive BFM series. That's a way away yet. Remember that speed control using angle of attack will be vital to ensure that you do not bleed too much energy during break turns, and that while pulling hard will increase your instantaneous rate and reduce your radius, you might find yourself with an energy deficit that you can't pay off. Also, remember the risk of pulling too much lead and the possible repercussions of an in-close overshoot. By the end of this video, you will know the cues that indicate that you're entering the bandit's bubble. You'll know how to assess your attack window entry and the appropriate follow-on maneuvers, and you'll know how to judge when misaligned turn circles will develop to make an energy excursion or shot possible. This video will cover only the mechanics of correctly entering the bandit's bubble and the cues that you will need to understand in order to make the correct attack window entry and then gauge if you are early or late. This video will be limited to a cooperative bandit, with BFM problems being limited to the initial break. Remember that we're progressing through this using a building block approach similar to how real military pilots are trained, so we need to get a firm grasp of the basics so that we don't try and run before we can walk. The video description will include a link to a mission file that will enable you to practice this flow against a cooperative AI target aircraft. Those links are coming, the files are coming, bear with me. It's just taking a little bit more time to get them together than I had really hoped for. The attack window was discussed briefly in the fundamentals video, and it's the point in space and time where an offensive break turn will result in the best possible entry into the bandit's bubble. A correctly flown attack window entry will result in the fighter arriving inside the bandit's control zone with range, angles and closure under control. It may still result in a slight flight path overshoot, but ideally this will be inside the control zone, so will deny a reversal opportunity. Let's first cover some context. It's important to understand what we're aiming to achieve with a properly flown attack window entry, as well as how and why it works. To be able to apply the theory outside the textbook case, you need to understand the fundamental geometry in play here. A textbook attack window entry begins with the fighter wholly offensive in the bandit rear quarter, just outside their bubble. The bandit can be expected to break into the fighter at this point, as any other course of action will only accelerate their demise. The fighter must resist the urge simply to turn and point at the bandit. Such a huge amount of lead will collapse range rapidly, while closure and aspect balloon, resulting in a neutralization of the fighter's position. Avoiding this situation is the essence of a correct attack window entry. The position that the bandit began their break is referred to as the point of departure. Driving to near this point in space is the first element of correct attack window entry, as it prevents the scenario previously described. It will seem counterintuitive at first, as angle off nose will increase and the temptation to turn in and point at the bandit will be significant. Resist. I will cover the cues to look for in a moment. An offensive break turn slightly inside the bandit point of departure will result in the fighter entering the bandit control zone with misaligned turn circles set up. Provided that the fighter was able to reach the attack window before the bandit made any significant angular gains, geometry alone will now eventually move the bandit towards the fighter's nose. A mild energy excursion will be all that is necessary to bring the fighter's nose to bear and generate a shot opportunity. Provided that the initial setup was favourable and the fighter makes no mistakes, nothing the bandit can do will prevent this while maintaining their energy. Remember that when we come to Defensive BFM. Greater separation at the start will allow the bandit to gain more angles before the fighter arrives at the attack window, and so follow-on BFM will be more of a rate war that will require patience from the fighter. Attack window entry is relevant only when offensive, as if the fighter starts far enough outside the bandit's turn circle, waiting for attack window cues will actually give the bandit an offensive position, as they'll be able to turn and point at the fighter. Under these circumstances, a high aspect merge is a better option, with a lead turn to take away any turning room, and hopefully gain a few angles. But this is out of scope for this video, so we'll focus on the mechanics of the textbook attack window entry. Perch setups described in later videos will allow you to practice this from the edge of and just outside the bandit's bubble. So having talked about what shouldn't and couldn't happen, let's get into the nuts and bolts of how to correctly enter the bandit's bubble. The first action for the fighter will be to unload to around 0G to maximise acceleration, unless they are already at corner speed or a descent is undesirable. This will get them to the attack window as quickly as possible, with the potential for a max rate break turn bleeding down to the rate band. Arriving at the attack window, the fighter will need to recognise bubble entry cues. As the fighter enters the bandit's bubble, the view of the bandit will change noticeably and suddenly. Imagine walking towards somebody swinging a bucket of water around on a line of string. Maybe they're trying to explain turn rate and radius. At a distance, the bucket will appear to move little in your field of vision, and you will alternately see the sides, the base, and into it. But as you enter the arc, and hopefully duck, its relative motion will take it rapidly across your field of view beyond 90 degrees and behind you, and now you will only be able to see into the bucket, with a limited view of the sides, but never the base. As with turn rate and radius, what's good for buckets is good for fighter pilots. Outside the turn circle, the bandit's aspect will be changing, but line of sight rate will be low. Entering the turn circle, aspect will stabilise, and line of sight rate will increase rapidly, known as line of sight rate explosion. These cues indicate that you have entered the bubble, and you should execute your offensive break turn by rolling, placing your lift vector on or slightly below the bandit, and executing a maximum performance pull, bleeding your airspeed down to the rate band, but not below. Immediately on commencing your offensive break turn, you are engaged to circle with the bandit in misaligned turn circles. If the bandit flies a good defensive break, their bubble will be collapsing as they bleed into the rate band, and their turn radius will be reducing. Yours will also reduce, but you must maintain your turn rate, as this is what will carry you into the bandit's control zone. It will be tempting to pull the bandit into the HUD. Resist. Once you're stabilised in the rate band, you need to assess your attack window entry. So let's look at how to do just that. If you're late turning and you've flown past the attack window before you broke, line of sight rate will not stabilise initially, and the bandit will continue to transition aft on your canopy. Avoid the temptation to bleed below the rate band to bring the bandit forward, as you will now be outside of the control zone and more across the circle than planned. This means that you now need to outrate the bandit initially to enter their control zone, and this is an extremely undesirable position to be in if the bandit is able to sustain a higher rate. If you were early and entered your offensive break turn before the attack window, you may still be outside the bandit's turn circle, and so the bandit will be travelling forward on your canopy and likely increasing aspect. The greatest risk here is an in-close flight path overshoot, so be prepared to sacrifice position to avoid giving up the advantage. Remember tenet 2, remain offensive. If you got the attack window entry nailed, then the bandit's position relative to the canopy will stabilise somewhere in the forward quarter. Depending on how misaligned turn circles have been set up, they may initially drift aft, but don't panic. Hold the rate band and wait for misaligned turn circles to reel the bandit forward. As the bandit is at their closest point to your nose, you should be presented with a shot opportunity or the option for a mild energy excursion to give you a shot opportunity. Gauge the bandit rate of relative motion to anticipate excursion or shot timing in order to avoid a second cycle of misaligned turn circles. Remember tenet 1. Kill as soon as possible. So as previously stated, a late entry is going to put you in the position of having to win the rate war. Actions to recover will depend on how badly you missed the attack window. Brief energy excursions within the rate band might allow you to make up for a slight late entry, particularly if the bandit feels threatened by your nose and makes the mistake of bleeding down below his rate band. Alternatively, dipping the nose below the horizon and using some altitude to help increase your rate might be a player. In either case, it will pay you not to be too greedy and try to take too big a bite. If you're grossly disadvantaged, or if the bandit effectively counters you and you end up rating to the deck, it might be a time to apply tenet 3. Plan ahead and aim to redefine to high aspect BFM and start over before you lose the upper hand. An early entry seems like less of an issue, but the birds of a grossly early entry will come home to roost much quicker than if you're late. A slight flight path overshoot is acceptable, but if you're going to overshoot, ensure it is through the control zone. Identify this early and move to lag as soon as you recognise the issue. If it's a big error, an out-of-plane manoeuvre, preferably nose up, might be necessary, but be prepared for the bandit to counter, and if you've not anticipated enough, there's a chance that you'll end up in a scissor of some kind. Alternatively, if an aggressive lag manoeuvre is required, you might find yourself kicked back outside the control zone and in a similar position as if you had been late to the attack window. Do anything you need to avoid an in-close overshoot. Anticipation and early rectification are the key to this. If you have an in-close flight path overshoot, there is a real danger you will violate all 3 tenets and end up flying out in front of the bandit. This is really bad news because we haven't yet covered defensive BFM. Assuming you nailed the attack window entry, you'll end up in the bandit's control zone. You're now in command of the fight and they are reactive. Wait for misaligned turn circles and use conservative energy excursions to bring the bandit into a weapon solution. It's likely that they will redefine nose low and ditch by rolling and using the vertical to increase their rate. If this is the case, it's not really any different to another attack window entry, just out of plane. Use the same technique, get to their departure point and enter the attack window using the same cues. Practice first entering the turn circle. Use the rectifications if you miss it. Terminate once you're in the control zone, or if you're out of ideas, debrief it, decide what to do differently, rinse, repeat. For the next bit, you're going to need a friend, which is one reason why it took me so long getting this video out. Practice attack window entries, and then get them to counter your early or late entries, and if you nail it, get them to redefine. Practice the follow, then terminate. We'll cover what to do once you're heading to the deck another time. In summary, correctly identifying the attack window is a fundamental skill. As I hope I've demonstrated, it's applicable in all planes of maneuver. Pretty much every attack you run is going to be met with a break turn in some direction, so you'll find yourself making use of these skills in almost every within visual range encounter you have. Don't rush to turn, don't just point, look for line of sight rate explosion and aspect stabilization, execute your best break and don't bleed below the rate band. Assess early, late or nailed and take the appropriate action. Don't be greedy. Remember to kill as soon as you can, but not to sacrifice follow-on options and the offensive just for a cheap shot, and if it's all going horribly wrong, get to high aspect and reset for another go. Thanks very much for coming back. As always, if you think this has been useful, click like and subscribe, but more important that you click on the DCS World icon, get into the game, practice, practice, practice. Let me know how you get on. I'll see you next time.